Welcome to Zero to Well Read, a podcast about everything you need to know about the books you wish you'd read. I'm Jeff O'Neill.
And I'm Rebecca Shinsky. Get ready to get broody, friends, because today we are discussing Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights. The time has come. The film is hitting theaters later this week. One of the big movie events of the year, and one of the big movie-going question marks, because this looks very spicy. It's Emerald Fennell who created Saltburn. And we would have gotten to Wuthering Heights at some point on this show for sure. One of the canonical books, but we are doing it today to coincide with the film, which we have not seen yet. I don't know if you're planning to. I'm going to go see it for science. We might do some more coverage of it. We'll see.
I don't know, maybe, Rebecca. And I feel in my bones after reading Wuthering Heights again and preparing for the show today, and something I felt going in, which is I think people don't know what they're talking about when they talk about Wuthering Heights. And I feel that way myself. And I've read it twice now.
1,000,000%.
I do think that of the service element to this show, this might be one of our higher value over replacement podcast episodes, because what people think Wuthering Heights is versus what it is, and then how it might be represented in this particular adaptation. And all adaptations, this is a wild story. This is an unruly book, and I think that's putting it mildly, and we're going to get all to that here, but I hope we do the work and the, basically the experience of reading it justice and give people something to think about and chew on and take forward with them as they see the movie, or frankly hear discourse about the movie, which I'm maybe more interested in than I'm in the movie itself, is the discourse.
That's a great point. I saw a trailer for this I've seen the trailers several times in the theater, but one of the recent times my husband was with me, and it was while I was reading the book, and we saw the trailer, and it scrolls across like the greatest love story of all time on the screen. And I'm like, what do you think this story is about? Yeah. And his guess of what it was about versus what this book is actually about was wildly off. And I'm going to assume that if you have not read Wuthering Heights and all you are familiar with is like the popular sort of cultural message, it's a great love story, he's the original bad boy, it's so broody, you're going to be surprised by what you hear today and what actually happens in the book. And I'm just certain that we're going to be surprised by what Emerald Fennell does with it in the film.
Yeah, Heathcliff doesn't brood. He screams and hit people. He actually does the opposite of brooding. Maybe I should save that for my hot take. But yeah, I don't know. I think it is. You have a note down here below, and we'll get to all of this here, that like the name is carrying a lot of water that feels like, it's this windswept, star-crossed lovers that can't be together, but they should be because of love and truth and beauty. It's not that book, folks. We'll get into it here. Click the link in the show notes to sign up for our free newsletter. Comes that we do once per episode. Vanessa Diaz is helping us corral some of our notes here, some explanatory material, some other fun stuff there. That one's free. Also, you can become a member of our Patreon to get early ad-free episodes, or at the higher level, bonus content. We sometimes plan what we're going to talk about in that bonus content. We have not done that today. We're going to kind of let's see what we find interesting and continue talking in that office hour segment. So that's patreon.com/0towellread. And a reminder to rate and review the show wherever you're listening. And you can always email us at zerotowellread@bookriot.com. I'd be especially interested in people's early reading experiences, people that haven't read Wuthering Heights and hear us talk about it. Go see the movie. This is ripe for feedback from you all. And thank you so much for listening, joining the show. Hit that 5 stars on Apple Podcast or Spotify, wherever where you listen. You can also find us on Instagram. You can find us on YouTube. Again, all those links are in the show notes there. Okay, Rebecca. Synopsis time. And this is one where maybe more than any other book we've read, and this is saying something because we've done Midnight's Children and Love in the Time of Cholera at this point, the plot matters, but it doesn't matter at all.
I think that's right. Yeah. I mean, my one-liner here is hell hath no fury like a goth boy scorned. Yeah. A stranger comes to town at the start of this book. His name is Mr. Lockwood. He's our original narrator. He is renting a different property that the owner of Wuthering Heights also owns. And so he goes to meet his landlord, and his landlord is Mr. Heathcliff, who, is living in this kind of great rambling house in the remote moors of Yorkshire. And Mr. Lockwood quickly realizes that he has walked into the middle of like a hot mess, the hottest of messes.
The vibes
Uh,
are so bad when he walks into this house. The vibes are terrible.
so bad. And he befriends the housekeeper, Nellie Dean, who gives him the lowdown on what's going on with these people and why they're all so mad at each other and how this has actually been going on for like a generation. So Heathcliff, who at the time the book opens is the owner of Wuthering Heights, was orphaned as a child. He was taken in by the Earnshaw family, who at the time owned and lived in Wuthering Heights. They were awful to him, treated him like a second class citizen, like adopted him as a child, but also made him a servant in the home. And Nellie Dean tells Mr. Lockwood that Earnshaw's treatment of Heathcliff was
Yeah.
enough to make a fiend of a saint. Heathcliff falls in love with their daughter, Catherine Earnshaw. So they're raised alongside each other, kind of as siblings, but we don't actually see much of their childhood or their
No.
relationship at all. But we're given to understand that she witnesses his suffering and he sees that she is this like kind of wild, free, unruly, independent girl. Um, they grow up. She chooses to marry the neighbor's son, Edgar Linton, and Heathcliff starts on his revenge tour. And this is just the beginning. He gets his revenge by marrying Edgar's sister, Isabella, manipulating her really into marrying him. But he stays obsessed with Catherine. Isabella, his wife, knows it, and she leaves Heathcliff while she's pregnant with his child because he goes and makes out with Catherine and everybody hears about it. Then Catherine gives birth and well dies giving birth
Hmm.
to her child with Edgar. The child is also named Kathy. The names in this book are hella confusing. So much
I can't keep
repetition.
it straight. I'm gonna screw it up at least 9 times today, and I even got like I've got a family tree, and I can't keep it straight, and I think that's part of the point, but we can get into
I
that in a
think
minute.
so too. I dog-eared the family tree page at the top of the book, and I cannot tell you how many times I flipped back to it trying to make sense of which Kathy they were talking about, which Mr. Linton, which
Who's a
Mr.
cousin to
Earnshaw.
whom? Who's a step cousin of what? And it's not
It is
like a
so
huge family
messy.
tree. I don't know if I'm
Yeah.
getting old and my brain is ricotta, but I had the damnedest time keeping the characters straight.
Well, like the family tree is really confusing in 100 Years of Solitude, but somehow not as confusing as this.
Yeah. Well, it feels like this should be wieldy and manageable. And I guess part of it is it doesn't matter, but there's just all these other people getting in Catherine and Heathcliff's way. I mean, maybe that's as important as
Yeah.
anything else to know who's who.
Yeah. So after Catherine dies giving birth to Kathy, Heathcliff just loses it. Like the wheels are off. He goes fully off the rails. And he's on this long, cold campaign of revenge that plays out over generations while he's systematically using marriage and money and real cruelty to punish the families that he believes destroyed his chance at the happiness that he's entitled to. Children inherit grudges that they didn't create and don't understand. And basically, everybody gets hurt, both physically and emotionally, and nobody gets a chance at redemption. Like this is not a happy ending. So I guess that's the first big thing is this is pitched as one of the great love stories of all time and it's talked about as a gothic romance. I think it is romantic in the capital R romantic sense
Yes.
and we can talk about what that romantic movement was in literature in a little bit, but a typical romance ends with a happily ever after and this is a nobody's happy ever.
I think the thing people would find most surprising about reading this book is that you would think the book as a romantic tragedy would end kind of at the end of volume 1 when Catherine, the elder Earnshaw, the object of Heathcliff's whatever. We can talk about what nature of emotion they're experiencing together.
Obsession,
Love,
possession.
yeah, lust, whatever it else might be. She dies and he's destitute, and that's where to this point, the most recognizable film adaptation is Laurence Olivier's 1938, 1939. I can't remember one of those 2
39.
years, but that ends there. It doesn't do the whole second volume where Heathcliff is an adult and moving the pieces around like a chessboard to inflict maximum pain and to secure his legacy, navigating the frankly Byzantine rules of English entailment and who's going to get what and who can marry whom and how it can't work. And then it sort of ends with a whimper, weirdly. Heathcliff dies sort of smiley, wildly into the rain. And then Kathy and Hareton sort of fall in love over teaching him to read, and they seem like they're going to be okay. And we're all just sort of left mystified, as are Nellie Dean and Mr. Lockwood. There is no resolution here of any kind. And I think that is interesting and fascinating in so many ways. but it sort of beggars belief how people think of this as one of the great, if not the great love stories over toured. And the only thing I can come up with, Rebecca, is that people don't know what they're talking about. Like they
I mean,
literally are just voting for it blind.
maybe I went and checked the Goodreads reviews, and there are
Okay.
some detailed, like, well thought out, long reviews where people are like, "I love this book and here's why." None of those cite it as a romance. So, like,
Mhm.
I think the, like, popular presentation of it as this is one of the great love stories, where did that start? Where
Yeah.
did the representation of this as a love story start? I could not track it down. I went down a lot of internet rabbit holes trying to figure out, like, who said this was a love story? Like, Catherine dies at the halfway through the book,
Yeah.
and the rest is the revenge tour. There's, like, it's all plot. That's one thing to say, like, there's because the story is relayed by Nellie Dean to Mr. Lockwood and then Mr. Lockwood to us, and sometimes other people to Nellie Dean to Mr.
Right.
Lockwood to us, we don't get any of Catherine and Heathcliff's interiority. We don't really have a sense of how they truly feel about each other or how those feelings developed. And then she's dead and the rest is the revenge tour, and it's clearly about Heathcliff's anger and that people took things that he wanted. And so he's going to take all of the things that they have. And marriage is the tool for doing that because marriage is the way that you get access to other people's property at this point in time.
Yeah.
That if he can marry this person and he can manipulate that one into marrying this other person, and then this person dies and their kid goes here, like all these pieces move around the chessboard so that ultimately he ends up in possession of all of this land.
Yeah, and I don't I kinda look similarly, like, when did it get transposed into a great love story? Because I think there's a good chance it was we're gonna talk about this a little bit, but it was re-evaluated in the 20s and 30s, um, and that 1938 movie starring Laurence Olivier, I think there's a chance that that was it, because if you end it there, it is more of a Romeo and Juliet tragic
Mm.
love story, right? Where they can't be together. There's a way, I have not seen this. There's a way of filming it where the world is keeping them apart, and were it not for bourgeois sensibilities or morals or whatever, these two true loves could be together, and they are sort of killed or eviscerated emotionally, physically, whatever, by the world. But that's not what happens in the actual book. It's something darker, it's something stranger, and I'm gonna use the word fascinating in, like, its highest realm, which is, like, not necessarily good, almost like watching a car crash is a
Yes.
fascinating,
Yeah. You
is
can't
what
look
we're
away.
seeing here. You can't look away from it, but if you end at the end of volume 1, and I have to believe that's where Fennell is gonna end this, because otherwise, my understanding is Jacob Elordi is gonna play Heathcliff and Margot Robbie is gonna play the elder Catherine Earnshaw. Margot Robbie's gonna die halfway through, and then it's gonna be about Elordi torturing kids? That's literally what we're gonna do here? I just don't believe that, Rebecca.
I don't believe it either, but also I have no idea what
No idea,
she's
right.
gonna do. Like, it wouldn't surprise me at this point for it to be like more of a translation of Wuthering Heights in the way
Yeah.
that One Battle After Another is a translation of Thomas Pynchon's Vineland. That the seeds of their vibe together shape the relationship at the heart of the movie. That's my guess going in, really, is that it will be more about like there's a lot of corsets and a lot of like lingering looks and like some BDSM sorts of vibes,
Yes.
overtones to the trailer. And like the trailer looks a lot sexier than the book, certainly. So, really, who knows? Maybe Fennell is playing with the popular imagination of
Yes.
Wuthering Heights and this misconception of it as a romance. It really is. It really is quite dark.
Yeah, and we'll get to once we talk more about what it's like and the ideas, maybe we'll come back to talk about possibilities for the adaptation. I find myself more sympathetic to just the trailer version of Wuthering Heights, because I think it might be trying to recreate the strangeness of contemporary readers of Wuthering Heights in 1848, especially 1850 and after, to the modern day. Like, this is a weird book. It's hard to say meant to, but the effect it had on contemporary readers is one of bewilderment. And again, I'm going to go back to an original, like, to make you feel wild while you're watching it.
Hmm.
To use that, like, I found myself, and I think a lot of readers find themselves confused and compelled simultaneously and frustrated by the text. And that's one sometimes that makes for an enduring work of art. Sometimes it makes for a mess that gets forgotten. But there's something here, and even contemporary critics at the time said, "This is a weird book. There's a lot I don't like about it. It's certainly immoral. Young ladies shouldn't read it," as you might imagine, 1847. Like, there's a lot more hitting each other and, like, abuse than we would like today, but especially when you think of, the mores of popular culture such as it was in 19th century England and America. But there's something here that is different, that seems to be of its own sense, and then we mix that in with the Bronte's own biography, which we'll get to in a second, is pretty fascinating, and so kind of right away, it was seen as a wild book. It doesn't seem connected to a lot of other things. I can talk to a little bit to how it's connected to Romanticism in a larger kind of way, but the Brontes themselves have become monuments of English literature. And it's still very much a contested work. Like, talk about books that answer questions and books that ask them. This one is sort of wondering where questions come from in its own way. Like, where is the source of all of this crap, and how do we deal with it? I find really compelling. Even as admit here, we're not quite into the reading section. I do not enjoy this book, Rebecca Shinsky. This is not one of my favorite books. I don't really enjoy the reading experience. The first 100 pages, especially, I'm like, God, this is tough sledding. But you get some of these moments, especially when Catherine and Heathcliff are talking to or about each other and explaining their torture, that I kind of don't, my reading mind doesn't blink. I'm compelled and fascinated, and I find myself returning to them.
I think that's a really important thing that the reading experience of this is, for me, also very uneven.
Yeah.
There were a lot of moments, and we saw each other in person while I was reading this, and I was like, "Man, I am suffering." Like, there are
Yes.
a lot of moments where I was like, "This is just taking me forever to get through." And then I would hit like a 20-page section where I would feel riveted to the page. And that sort of that unevenness and like that you don't quite know where the story is going or what's about to happen or what's important and what ultimately will not be important. And most of it is ultimately not important, is challenging and like, I mean, frankly, it took me 10 days to get through this 300
Yeah.
page novel, which is a lot for me. I needed to space it out. Let's talk a little about like a little more about why this is important. And I think that the myth around the Bronte
Mhm.
sisters is part of it. Like, not only is the book important because it is part of the sort of gothic romance canon, but this is Emily Bronte's only novel. Of course, her sister Charlotte wrote Jane Eyre. Their sister Anne, also a novelist. All of them died young. This is published in 1847, originally under a pen name. She wrote it as Ellis Bell. The sisters all wrote under these assumed names that are sort of, they come across as gender neutral,
Yes.
names that would have been assumed to be male at the time because they understood that there were prejudices against female names, female writers. So they published their poetry originally under male names. And then after Emily dies, Catherine, or sorry, Charlotte. There's so many names, Jeff.
Yeah, I know, right? Which Catherine, which Bronte? Yeah, it's
Yeah,
it's it's tough.
after Emily Bronte dies, her sister Charlotte sort of comes clean that Ellis Bell was Emily Bronte, and she does some edits and, sort of reframes and repackages the story and publishes it. It was radically transgressive at the time, and not just because Catherine and Heathcliff are their relationship is semi-incestuous, like, they're not related to each other, but they were raised as brother and sister functionally. There's
Kinda
really
Royal
no
Tenenbaums energy, right? Like, it's wrong.
Yeah.
It's not illegal, but it's kinda wrong, as
But
Royal
there's also
Tenenbaum says.
no
Yeah.
discussion of that. Like,
No.
there's no discussion of that at all on the page. People just recognize in the story that Catherine and Heathcliff love each other and can't be together, but no one's like, "Hey, isn't that kind of weird?" And that in itself is transgressive, not to remark upon the transgressive nature
Yes.
of it. And I think you're right that people just didn't know what to do with this when it came out. It was only modestly successful at the time, not nearly as successful as Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre. And as you mentioned earlier, it just came into having any sort of popularity or critical respect in the 20th century.
It's in doing the background, I knew, but I had forgotten, and we'll get to Jane Eyre eventually too, a true sensation on the order of anything we would talk about in contemporary culture. It's even remarked upon in some of the contemporary reviews of Wuthering Heights that like there's a Jane Eyre fever sweeping the country to the point where they just assume the reader of a review of Wuthering Heights has read Jane Eyre already, even though it came out a little bit after. I mean, really, probably in the 50 Shades kind of cultural dominance, except that there weren't TV or movies or music. So it's hard to it's
Less
hard to
competition.
it's just hard to convey how much a literary sensation like this mattered in the sort of proto popular culture imagination. We talked a bit um, about that with Dickens, but Jane Eyre was very much the case. And stories for women about love and women's concerns, and we can talk more about that, are have been underrated as a cultural and artistic force since the dawn of whatever. And this is another example of this. But I think Wuthering Heights and it's was pulled along long enough to be rediscovered because of the Brontë association with Jane Eyre, which was so much more popular. There were people. I'll try this book by the other Brontë sister. That's also uh, a story about something we may recognize as love, if we're sort of in an opium den or something like that. And it was sort of carried along long enough to be reconsidered later. And I reread this appreciation of Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights by Virginia Woolf, which is quite beautiful. And that she, a- as someone who is interested in women's writing, A Room of One's Own, and that whole tradition, she saw something powerful and unique in Emily Bronte. And it's so hard to remember that Bronte was like 28, and this is her first book, and she'd had as much education as she could really had, but sort of left to her own devices. They spent a lot of time writing and reading, and she and her sister created this sort of fictional Scottish Highland world of Gondal, and there's a whole backstory, and then produced this book, which is wild to look at. And I have this quote here from a contemporary critic that I think is illustrative, and I think I agree with it to some degree, which is here's a quote: "If the rank of a work of fiction is to depend solely on its naked imaginative power, then this is one of the greatest novels in the language, because there's something raw and I don't want to say true, but compelling and feels elemental here
Mm.
about something." And we can talk about what that thing is. Is it love? Is it desire? Is it repressed psychosexual whatever? But there's something going on here that continues to compel. And is there a better version of this book, which is not sort of groaning under the metatextual stuff and the comings and goings and the confusing? And we can get to the sort of the spinning molten core here, which is these two AAA literary figures in the form of Catherine Earnshaw and Heathcliff. And one of my hot takes, I'll spoil it here, is like Catherine Earnshaw is much of a villain as Heathcliff is.
Oh,
But
100%.
and he
Yes.
gets because the name is more recognizable, and not just another Catherine show title. We sort of underestimate her own. She's like Lady Macbeth.
I
Like
think she's
this,
like the original unlikable heroine.
yeah, this is like if what if Richard II and Lady Macbeth fell in love? That's what this book is. And then sort of Kool-Aid man themselves into an Austen setting. That's what this book is, Rebecca. And I think
Mhm.
that makes it fascinating, but also very hard to wrap your arms around.
Yeah, and people certainly felt that at the time. I think
Yes.
critics and scholars continue to feel that. Lucasta Miller, a scholar of the Bronte sisters, wrote the preface to the edition that I was reading, and she called it the
Mm,
most passionately original novel in the English language. Like, be careful out there, but like passionately original at the time, maybe.
yes.
But it was very different. Like Dickens is writing at the same time. This is around the same, like the same era where his
Yes.
major novels are coming out. And those are for all of how I mean how wonderful Dickens is and inventive he is, this is a truly like horse of a different color. Like
Hmm.
Wuthering Heights is just a thing that nobody had seen before. And when a book like that comes out, it's going to be divisive. It's going to be a topic of a lot of conversation. But then, especially when the author is a young woman who has died, she comes from this family of all these young women writers. They've all died. Like the whole family is wrapped in tragedy. And like to get into Bronte's bio a little bit, like
Yeah.
she's the fifth of six kids in her family. Her mom was from a wealthy family. Her dad was a member of the clergy, and they grew up she grew up living in the parsonage of a Yorkshire village of about 5,000 people called Haworth. And their life was really confined to home and to family. Emily Brontë read really widely, but Charlotte described her as caring very little for the world beyond her beloved Yorkshire moors. Like, she was a homebody. And I think that's interesting too, like, that
Yeah.
she didn't have a lot of experience out in the world. She didn't have a lot of touch points with people beyond those in her immediate vicinity. And her childhood is shadowed by death. Her mom dies when she's 3, then 2 of her older sisters die when she's 7. And her father is for being, the parson, for being a member of the clergy, is also, difficult. He's cold and hard, he's weird, he imposes, like, seemingly arbitrary rules on the girls. He carried a loaded gun at all times for
A lot
reasons
of
that
guns in
nobody
Wuthering Heights,
Yeah.
and then when I read the book first before going back to do the biography, it's like, "Oh, she was just used to see dudes wandering around their house with guns over their
Yeah,
shoulders." So
her dad
strange.
is prone to rages, and there's a character in the book
Yeah.
who is, like, also racked with grief and prone to rages, and he gets drunk and he grabs his gun and you don't know what's gonna happen, and, that's because this is the thing Emily Brontë has seen in her life.
Mhm.
But it's more complicated than that. Like, their father also was a little bit radical. He wanted the girls to be educated, and, the intro to my edition described Emily Brontë as highly, if haphazardly, educated,
Yeah.
that their father made sure all the girls had access to formal education, and I think this is really critical, their leisure reading was not nearly as supervised as other middle-class girls and women at the time. So they were out there reading whatever they wanted, and having sort of the opportunity to let their minds be unruly, and you can certainly see that happening in the book.
Yeah, and that we get a little of that in Wuthering Heights, the importance of books and libraries and borrowing books or where it's taken away or burned. Very much a I don't even know if it's a metaphor. I think it just is. It stands for itself as being a means of escape, a means of engagement, a means of autonomy within your own mind and your own body when so many other avenues are cut off from you. And I think, like Shakespeare, the relative dearth of biographical data makes her and Charlotte and Anne and the work that much more compelling that there
Yes.
isn't a follow-up. This isn't the first, and it's like, 8 novels later, you're gonna see her in her first form. That this was her first one out of the gate is shocking. And, you and I have some telltale signs of a debut novelist even today, and I think we see some of these
Yes.
here about, like, larded with narration and exposition, but at the highest moments, the most fascinating moments, you can see what heights she's able to reach, and that you kind of can't teach. You can teach a lot of the other crafty stuff, and I wonder if over time would she have softened or would she have heightened by getting
Mm.
some of the other accoutrements and structural problems out of the way? It's fascinating to know, and then she's then available for later scholars, largely feminists, to take her up and consider her from a more modern sensibility of, like, how is this about repressed women and lack of education and lack of opportunity and the male gaze and male dominance and violence and sort of sexual seclusion and the very real, I mean, the inciting incident here that really carries us through the end of volume 1 and volume 2 is where Catherine Earnshaw kind of makes a business decision to marry Edgar, right? To say, okay, we're going to secure some money here because if I don't, then if I marry Heathcliff, that's who I really care for. And again, I have quotes under care, love, all those things because I'm not even sure what emotion this is. And what I can do is I can have my cake and eat it too. I can get the benefits that come along with having the estate and then use that to raise Heathcliff up and he can stay close but we just can't get married because things will just fall apart. We will be ruined, and she doesn't really see, or really there's no way out because they're all ruined anyway because of what Heathcliff ends up doing. And she's trapped, right? She can't have what she wants because, a different version of this, she could go out and make her fortune and live and be a governess or whatever, but like that's not at stake for her here. She's got no outs and she has to make do and make the kind of concession that, to use the book I kept thinking about as a weird bizarro doppelganger, Pride and Prejudice, where Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy are tamer versions, or Heathcliff and Catherine are sort of evolved Pokemon versions or something of those two characters, where she turns down Mr. Collins, who's giving her an out to keep Longbourn. What if she had taken that?
Mm.
And then Mr. Darcy was a psychopath. You know, like that's what you get with something like this. And then you get to spin those things out, and it becomes very interesting substrate upon which to do kinds of thinking and to explore. But it itself is elusive about what it cares about. I mentioned it's considered a romantic novel. It's certainly, the Brontes would have been reading the romantic movement of the time, distinguished from romance of today, which is really narrowly defined as a story about physical or emotional romantic love that ends in a happy end, or happy for now. Romanticism was something else, and it was in a large part a counter move towards enlightenment thinking of rationality. Very interested in nature. It was interested in the supernatural. It was interested in the sublime. It was interested in intuition, in feeling. Um, and you can certainly see that here. And then we get a little bit into horror and gothic horror, which sometimes this is associated with, because there are no real ghosts in this. Are we to believe, Rebecca, that there are any quote unquote real ghosts in this? Is the reader to believe that there are real ghosts being seen here? That's one
I
of the
did
great
not read
questions of
it.
the book.
I
Yeah.
didn't read it as real ghosts, but, like, the vibes are so bad. Like, we talk about people being haunted by,
Yes.
like, the loss of someone, or haunted by the terrible end of a relationship forever, and Heathcliff is certainly haunted, and
Yeah.
some of the older Earnshaws are also haunted, but this is not a ghost story.
Yeah. At the very least, though, some of the characters believe they've seen ghosts, or they've had very strange dreams. Like even Mr. Lockwood, he comes in, he has this very odd dream that
God,
seems
there's
like,
so many dreams, Jeff, so
yes,
many
right.
dreams.
And that's a hallmark of a certain kind of gothic story where something beyond merely human cognition is at stake. I mean, Heathcliff is so haunted by Catherine, like digs her ass up to make sure she's in there, which is a wild scene, by the way. I'm sure we'll get.
Mhm.
Well, maybe we won't. Depends on where Fennel ends or how we put that in there. But these people are very much, at least they're open to the idea that these ghosts and figures, who've been wronged or have died under strange circumstances, are still sort of around, and even maybe they want them around because at least they're not gone. At least they're not consigned to oblivion, right? You'd rather be haunted by the one true thing that matters to you than to not be. And so that's a fascinating. I mean, there's lots of readings of the end of what's going on there. I don't know, but it's also, but Bronte wasn't like writing letters to Wordsworth or something like that. She was reading these people, but she wasn't a part of these literary conversations. It's not like Concord, Massachusetts, right? Where Thoreau, we
Right.
did this with who were we talking about? Gosh darn it. Oh, Alcott, sorry.
Yeah.
Um, it wasn't those situations. She was a little bit more like Emily Dickinson, where she was there and it was in the water, but she wasn't at the salons or writing for the thing and being edited by other people. So she has her own strange sort of offshoot of it, almost like a kind of an evolutionary dead end where you get this one branch of the family tree of romanticism in English literature, but it kind of doesn't go anywhere. And it's hard to know to do something with how to know to do
Yeah,
something with
that,
that.
like, traditionally, we talk about the romantic era of literature as, like, really interested, as you said, in nature, in wildness, in
Yes.
imagination, and it is unruly and dark and stands in contrast to that enlightenment, rationality, practicality, things moving along in a logical sort of way, and they're really, like, there is a logic to Heathcliff here, but it is not it's not the ruling logic of the day, and it's certainly not a logic that anybody, I think, wants to live inside. This whole thing is so much more complex than
Yes.
any of the blurbs, any of the, like, attempts to synopsize it. I did the exercise of asking ChatGPT, like,
Oh
"What is
no.
Wuthering Heights about? What happens?" And it's like, "Here are all of the moments that occur," but it can't get to how strange it is to read this book and and to watch really the cruelty. Like, I don't think we can
Yes.
press on that hard enough here, that Heathcliff is not just a villain, but deeply cruel and abusive to everyone around him, to the animals in his home, to the people in his home. I don't think psychopath is an
No.
exaggeration for the behavior, and that is also kind of unremarked upon. Like, people talk about how mean he is, but nobody's like, "Whoa, this guy is way out of pocket."
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
that
it's hard to know because they don't know what to make of Heathcliff, and we haven't really talked about this, where he is ambiguously, culturally, ethnically, racially categorized. At one
Mhm.
point, maybe
He's
your mother
dark,
was the
yeah.
queen of the Orient, or maybe your dad was an Indian trader, or there's some subsequent criticism that maybe he was an escaped slave, and because he's darker, but also is he a gypsy? But also, could it just be that he has darker complexion and it's not about some racial dynamic that would be completely foreign to this little
Yeah.
Yorkshire community? He he is ununderstandable, and that's the point. I think
Yes,
that's
and
largely more the point than anything else.
there's not a spinning moral core to the
No.
story. And that was one of the most interesting things about diving into a lot of the criticism and people's interpretations of it, is that, like, Bronte did not have a defined political sensibility. Her sisters talked about this after her death. Like, early readings of it identified this. Like, she didn't have a political sensibility. She did not identify as a feminist of her day. There's not a political or gender argument at the heart of Wuthering Heights. And that means that it becomes a Rorschach test. Like,
Yes.
it's a kind of projection screen for whatever you do want to find in Wuthering Heights, you can find. And I don't know that that's something Bronte was doing on purpose. Um, it seems to me to be a byproduct of, if you're not writing from a really
Yes.
defined social perspective, you end up opening yourself up to all sorts of interpretations, but we just can't know. And the book is harder to pin down than any of the sort of popular cultural descriptions of it want it to be.
We don't get anything. Like, it would be so fascinating to know, and I don't know if the discourse, and we'd be the poor for it, but, like, what part of this was she herself most interested in? Like,
Mm.
the question I would ask if I had 20 minutes to talk to her would be like, "How the hell did this thing get started? Like, what were you seeing that got you to think in these terms?" Because it's almost like the chronicle of an emotional natural disaster than it is a story about anything. It's like Heathcliff and Catherine are these romantic meteors that hit this little community and destroy everything. And it's sort of Nietzschean, it's sort of beyond good and evil. It's like it's not even about morality because it doesn't even seem like they're subject to it. They're not capable of engaging with morality or should they do this or not. There's this one scene where Catherine asks Nellie, like, have I done the right thing? And she's asking earnestly, but she also can't she has no sense of how to evaluate it herself in marrying Edgar. And Nellie's like doing all these sort of middle brow rationalizations, double speak stuff about, well, if you think it was right and it makes sense and I love you and you'll be made. And she's like, but I do the right thing? Because she sort of knows that there was no right thing. And it leaves us to ponder ourselves like, wait, it doesn't lend itself to if they'd only done X, if they only done Y. It just doesn't seem subject to those kinds of things.
The, like, did I do the right thing? And then that there is no one right thing, like, is indicative of the fact that there were not clear paths to, like, free expression for women
Yes.
at the
Right.
time. And Bronte may have been feeling that. Catherine is certainly feeling it on the page. And that can be true without the book being like a feminist
Right.
argument, because she's also out there, like, marrying a man just for money and then making him watch functionally while
Yes.
she cuckolds him. Like, Edgar knows that
Yeah.
Catherine is still in love with Heathcliff. He knows that she's just with him, and he's made to watch them be around each other and to see that connection. Like, when I was describing this to Bob, I was like, Heathcliff is just Mr. Steal Your Girl right in front of Edgar. They're not only not going to any trouble, but they're not making any attempts at all
Yeah.
to hide how they feel about each other. Isabella knows right from the start that Heathcliff doesn't love her and that the
Mhm.
marriage is out of convenience, it's functional, it's just a utility to get him these other things that he wants, but she also has no options. And so there is sort of there's a way of reading this that is about how dark the very limited options available to women are and what that rage could drive a woman to do, except the women don't get to have rage on the page here. It's only Heathcliff.
Yeah, there's a couple of scenes where I can't remember which Catherine it is, I think it's Kathy Jr., um, like, grips someone's arm to stride and scratches that she draws blood, and it's described as a vixen, and she's a wolf, and you'll see her talons now, but just physically, Heathcliff is huge, like, that's another thing, like, he's a physically intimidating presence where there's no fair fight to be had with Heathcliff. They're very limited in their ability to fight back, but they do show their fangs, and they do some other things, but they're still so subject to his own physical presence. And then, what does he represent? The patriarchy? It's hard to do that because
I think that's
he
way too
is
simple of a reading.
it's way too simple of reading because he himself is subject to being outside of the social caste system of the day. Like he goes off for 3 years to make his fortune doing God knows what, gambling or stealing or giving several, or did he did he go to America and fight in the revolution and make a bunch of money, or was he a privateer? It's unknown, except that what it probably wasn't happening, he didn't just go walk and become part of the landed gentry because that wasn't, something he could do. But there's this mystery about his own being of being an outcast in society. And you have down a little bit later, I'm sure as well, like hurt people. There's an element to that that's not wrong. It's not, it's
No,
not, it's not
that's not the
encompassing.
point.
It doesn't explain the whole thing, but there is an element of people here that are outside of their ability to build their lives as they would wish without making some serious compromises and bad choices uh, along the way. Rebecca, when did you first read this book?
This was my first completed attempt
Mm,
at Wuthering Heights. I tried it in high school. I think I was probably trying to make my way through the great romances. Like I remember reading Lady Chatterley's Lover and Rebecca around the same time, and starting this and being so annoyed, like where the hell is the romance? What's happening here? And just bailing. Like you, I do not like this book, but reading it through the lens of like, what would it have been like to read this in
yeah,
1847 was really helpful. And also kind of the mystified, curious, what are we still doing with Wuthering Heights? Why does it still have such a grip on us? That was how I got through it. What about you?
yeah. High school on my own, as I was trying to round out the books that I should be read as in my own long, never-ending journey to be well read, I guess, that continues apace. I was completely bewildered by it. I did not have any structure for understanding or having a way of being even sort of intellectually interested in it or historically interested. I do not like this book, but I don't think liking is the point. And I am compelled by it. I do think that it has an elemental force that amongst a lot of other cobwebs and strangeness in a bad way, there's something here that's seems to be of its own and not strange for strangeness sake. And one thing I continue to remind myself, and I'd like to remind people listening to this show and others that experience art of any kind, the art that continues to be discussed and endures usually falls into one of two categories. One is it is either the first and or the highest expression of a moment, an idea, a movement, a form, or it's its own thing, and it breaks free of something else like that.
It's a
Whenever we
weirdo.
have it's a weirdo, and whenever we have a big contemporary hit that's a weirdo, whether it's Onyx Storm or The Da Vinci Code or 50 Shades, people are always so shocked that this weird thing became a phenomenon when I continue to argue that only weird things become
Yes.
phenomenons because
Yes.
you have to be weird, you have to be novel to a novel has to be novel for it to really break out and catch fire. There has to be dry kindling for the fire to catch, something that's been burned out already. And at the very least, Bronte is she is out scrambling rocks that people didn't know could be scrambled. And that I tend to find. I'm glad to have read it again.
Mhm.
I'm not going to be out here and trying to get people to read it because it is its own flavor and it's not for everybody.
Yeah, and I think to that point, this is maybe the first book we've talked about here that I don't think is widely taught today. Like
Yeah.
Even Twilight from the first
Yeah.
season is taught in some places, but Wuthering Heights is one of those classics that people recognize as a classic. You recognize it as you did as a kid, as something that you
Mhm.
should have read or you should get to someday because it's important for reasons we don't quite understand, but it's not like I couldn't find a lot of syllabi that Wuthering Heights is on. I'm sure there are people doing this like in the graduate level. I didn't encounter it in college. I talked to some friends, like nobody had to read this in school. Everyone that is in
Yes.
my like pretty literary social circle who had a story about Wuthering Heights had one similar to ours that they picked it up on their own because they heard it was important. And trying to read this without a guide, especially if you're like 17 and
Mhm.
the language is old fashioned and you don't have a grounding in like what's going on here, would have just been super challenging.
So, talk about your own like let's dive into that a little bit of like your actual reading experience. What is the physical sensation of reading this like?
I mean, honestly, I was annoyed a lot of the time. There's a lot of setup, like
Mhm.
35 pages to just set up for us, like how Mr. Lockwood arrived, where he arrived, and who Nellie Dean is, and who all the characters are. And then not much about Catherine and Heathcliff. Like, if you go into this expecting to figure out why these people love each other, it's frustrating,
Yes.
that we don't get to see it. It resists tidy interpretation, and so I think if you can just let it be messy, like, once I got myself into that space of like, "Oh, this is a
Yes.
mess. These are messy people."
And we
Uh,
like messes.
we
You and I,
do,
generally, like speaking, are interested in messes.
we do, and they're messy in a similar way to, like, the way that Gatsby is messy. Like,
Mm.
everybody's just out there reacting to stuff. So when I got into that headspace, that was really helpful. Um, and I really had to resist applying a contemporary lens to this. Like, there's a way
Yeah.
to talk about this as a story about trauma and revenge, and it is, but I don't think that's what Bronte is doing. And like Heathcliff is one of those guys who can't have what he wants, so nobody can have what they want. And I think she recognized that type. She
Mhm.
recognized the anger. Um, there's a lot about like implicitly women as property, that women are the gateway to getting the property that you want, but she's not writing from the perspective of like, how dare men use women as pawns in these
Right.
situations. It's just, you really have to put yourself in an 18, like tie on your bonnet and go to
Mhm.
1847. And I was surprised by how violent it
Yes.
was. Like, really deeply disturbingly violent, probably one of the reasons it's not taught in a lot of classrooms. Heathcliff is hitting people, he's yelling at people, he's throwing stuff, he's torturing the pets, and, like, also none of that is really remarked upon as super bad. He's just it's just the way he is, the thing that he's doing. And it's hard to track, as we talked about at the beginning, that like multiple people are named Catherine. There's multiple Earnshaws going around. There's multiple Mr. Lintons. Like which generation we're in and like everything is unsettling. And I do think that is intentional on Bronte's part. That like these
Mm.
people are messy. They're unsettled. The experience of reading it is unsettled. I had some like, did Emily Bronte invent postmodernism? like like, the text makes you feel sometimes the way that the characters feel. I'm just like, I can't get my head around this. I don't know what ground I'm standing on." A really kind of one of a kind reading experience.
Yeah. I think it might be helpful for people that want to trot out to the moors is to see it more like a mystery than a romance. Because you look at
Love
how
this
it's put
point.
together. Lockwood comes into town, like often happens, some of a stranger comes into town and something weird is going on. He falls ill and he's essentially laying in bed for a long time. And Nellie comes to tell him the story in parts. And sometimes he's left in suspense between parts. And we're kind of in the middle of it, right? Because we sort of catch up with the contemporaneous events through Lockwood's eyes and his sort of entanglements with them as being the leasee. But he's trying to figure out what this is going on, and Nellie is telling him what she knows, and her understanding is incomplete. Also, she's also younger than I am, Nellie, by the way. I thought that was important. She's like the old, servant, and she's like 7 years younger than I am, and who has a
Middle-aged characters have it rough in books from this time
though I
period.
have to say, her memory is unbelievable. Reciting entire passages of dialogue back and forth between two people that happened years ago. Anyway, that's one of the. But she herself is trying to understand the story. She can relay events, but she doesn't understand them. She knows like what happened, but she is in awe of Catherine and Heathcliff, especially as anybody else is. And the book is trying to get to tell us the truth, which is what happened, but why it happened, the source of this feeling, the source of these desires, the source of this momentum is completely unresolved. But if you think of it as more of a mystery, I think it helps understand why we get these layers of text, right? You mentioned it, but I think at one point I tracked that Lockwood is telling us the story of him being told the story of someone telling her the story about a letter they got in which someone else was telling. There's like 6 layers of text to
Yeah.
wade through. And I think there's an element of like myth making that happens when you do that. Like Heathcliff is like a demigod, almost like Beast and Beauty and the Beast kind of character that everyone is revolving around and no one has direct access to. So you all have these stories and stories and this, and I saw him, he was doing this, and it's like he is a monster in that regard, or like Jaws, where you see him kind of swimming around, but then when he does come up, it's terrifying and sort of beautiful and awesome in like the larger version of awesome. That's experience I had. I think the central question to me, if I could boil it down to maybe my best guess here of what this is about, is what if you take the idea of an all-consuming love to its logical end? This idea of you are the only thing that matters to me is a fundamentally selfish, narcissistic, world abnegating position. And that is sort of at the core of some of the most, I don't know, sentimental, mawkish, extreme versions of I only need you. There's just the two of us. The whole world could fall away, right? Well, what if someone actually did this who was also a giant brute and just didn't care about the rest of the world except to be with one person? What would happen if they didn't have that person? Wouldn't it look a lot like this?
Yeah, I think it would, and that gets to, I think, maybe why teenage girls have been
Mm,
drawn to this. The idea of "You're all that I need, I would destroy the world for you," has historically been presented as romantic and
yes.
positive. I find it to be gross. Like,
And
go
antisocial and criminal
yes.
most of the
Can
time,
the
yes.
dude get a hobby, please? Uh,
Yeah.
but, like, yeah, you don't actually want that. You don't actually
No.
want to be the whole center of someone's world. This is a cautionary tale about
Mhm.
having a lover who's obsessed with you. And like maybe the modern version of it is those memes that are like, get you somebody who looks at you the way that, like
Mm,
whoever it is in the
mhm.
photo is looking at this other person. But we don't actually want this. It is not actually good. It is obsession is destructive. And if I think you're right that if Bronte is going for anything, it is look at how destructive single-mindedness, obsession, this idea of one true love can be. Just to go back to the layers and layers of
Yes.
narration, that's the narrative choices here are the most interesting thing about the book to me, that it's told second or third or fourth or fifth or sixth hand by the time that the story gets to us. And that means we should really wonder
Yeah.
what is true here. Like, this is a game of telephone. And Heathcliff is certainly brutish, but we can't know how he felt or how Catherine felt because they never tell us. We're never in their heads. We hardly get any direct dialogue. And that choice on Bronte's part, like that's one of the things that I would want to ask her is what are you getting at with like that we only see these people through like multiply removed lenses, makes it really interesting, but also is kind of a reader beware. Like you
Yeah.
don't take any of this as gospel.
I think another thing that it does is all these sort of textual layers, when we get a moment of Catherine or Heathcliff almost monologuing about how they're feeling, it heightens that because of all the other dross that we have to wade through to get there. So it's like you have to go through the moors and climb up the rocks. But then when you get the sunset for a moment, I think it feels all the more sublime or all the more powerful because of how rare that thing is. And there are several here that in a play version of this, Catherine and Heathcliff would get wonderful speeches. Terrible, but wonderful. And that's the thing that got me to think about again, my best analogy is what if Richard II and Lady Macbeth fell in love on the moors in a Jane Austen novel? Like that's what you would get with something like this. All right. Time for stray thoughts. What else was wandering in and out of the transom of your mind as you were making your way through this book, Claire?
Boy, these people are a nightmare blunt rotation.
Though in a way it would improve things if everyone had a little downer.
Yeah. Yes. Everybody needs to just chill a little bit.
Yes.
But I do appreciate on a level that a book where literally everyone is unlikable has been this widely and consistently read. Like, well, more of that, please. Unlikable characters are much more interesting. Unhappy characters tend to be much
Right.
more interesting. But also just like, wow, you're going to be disappointed if you saw the trailer for this or you've just heard this is one of the great romances and you pick up Wuthering Heights expecting a sexy, exciting, like passionate book.
Mhm.
It's just so different from the public narrative about it.
I think, yeah, I do think that we are not given to believe. I don't think there's even any a stretch reading where Heathcliff and Catherine are having a sexual relationship. I think it's that they're not that maybe makes it feel so on edge the whole time. Like they just need to do it to some regard, and I think there's a version of the movie where the anticipation, the desire is at such a fever pitch that people are like acting out of their minds. And that maybe is an explanation as well as anything else here. Um, I wonder about I wonder about is this if Romeo and Juliet were dicks? That's my other thought here. What if Romeo and Juliet were just like
Just assholes.
really toxic assholes and they're all dead at the end? It wouldn't be beautiful, but it would be something.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. I also, thinking about other classic literature, kind of wondered if
Mm,
Heathcliff was a prototype for Gatsby. That Heathcliff, he goes away and then he returns and he's made money, as you said, and we don't know where his money has come from. And people tell all these stories about him and they make all these assumptions and project things onto him. And that happens with Gatsby too. Like they're not the same character, but Gatsby also is this sort of mythical, he's arrived out of nowhere, he has all this money, people like to imagine what his backstory is. And I couldn't find any formal like mention or
yeah.
acknowledgement of Fitzgerald talking about Wuthering Heights, but one would think he at least would have had the opportunity to read it. There's a lot of threads that are similar. Like a man appears from nowhere and has no confirmable backstory and becomes this screen onto which people project all sorts of assumptions. Or maybe just an interesting thread connecting the two.
Yeah, that reminds me a little bit of David Copperfield's mentor and David Copperfield of like this
Mm.
person of sort of sketchy background. And it's actually said in the book Wuthering Heights, like honest people don't have to hide things. I think we're pretty much told that he got up into some shenanigans, right? Like I don't know if it was a bootlegger or slave trader. It could be anything at this point. But it was not on the up and up for sure. I have an analogy here. 50 Shades is to Twilight as Wuthering Heights is to Pride and Prejudice. And by that I mean, famously E.L. James wrote 50 Shades because of the chasteness of Twilight, especially the first volume,
Mm.
right? And like the understanding that our human emotions, our sexual desire, our romantic love, our roiling passions resist that kind of restraint. It cannot be restrained by that. And there's a development like Pride and Prejudice, 1813, I think. So
About 30 years earlier.
about 30, yeah, like, the Brontes certainly would have read and adored, I assume, Austen, or maybe been frustrated by it, because as much as I love Pride and Prejudice, as much as I love Austen, sensual it is not. The spontaneous outpouring of uncontrollable emotions was sort of the definition of romanticism according to Wordsworth, or is that Coleridge? I get this confused. It's been a while. It is not. It's awfully chaste. It's awfully monk-like and priest-like. It is Apollonian, not Dionysian, for all you Greek heads out there. And it does feel to me like, well, what if they just could not resist each other for good or for ill, Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth Bennet, and not even just them specifically, but this dynamic of these more formal, these more acceptable, there's more socially acceptable drawing room kinds of stories about love. But we also all know there's a lot more to the human heart than that. And, part of me is like, what if she just wanted to let him off the hook and let him
Yeah,
go?
this is making me think about how during our Twilight episode, you were yelling at one point, "Just do it already!"
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, I think if they had just had a chance to consummate their relationship, like a lot of this is that it's unrequited. And the traditional reading of Wuthering Heights is that they don't get to consummate their relationship, that it's all just yearning forever. And that's also dangerous and toxic sometimes.
Yeah.
Like just let them do it. And
Yeah.
then, no, like,
Existential blue balls is not good for anybody. Everything, I mean, that is not good. That's not healthy. It's going to go real bad for a lot of people.
you heard it here first, folks. Other stray thoughts. I don't know that the pathetic fallacy, which is where weather stands in for people's emotional states, has ever worked harder than in Wuthering Heights.
To the point where his name is Heathcliff, where Heath is another word for moor. So his name is just cliffs on a moor. Like his name is the place they are. Like, can you do that, Rebecca? Do we allow this?
I know
I
we're
guess we
also
have to.
allowing, like, Bronte refers to all the residents of Wuthering Heights as inmates, which I looked
Yes.
and was like in use at the time as a stand-in for residents, but also feels to me chosen.
It's so claustrophobic. I don't know if we've gotten that word into the air here, but the whole
Mm.
thing is so claustrophobic. Even though it's in the moors because of the weather in the winters, like it's just people are sitting around in rooms bouncing off the walls and into each other like for 3/4 of the book.
Yeah, everybody needs to like go for a walk, you
Yeah.
know,
Do some
get outside.
push-ups, get a
Yeah.
little aerobic activity, some yoga maybe. What
You
else do I have
you
here?
what you
Is this
need
where
is
we
your
get
silly little mental health walk is what they
Yeah, right,
need here.
totally. Well, and they do them all the time, it doesn't help, it makes it that's where the ghosts are, Rebecca, on your mental health walk. I don't know, I didn't confirm this, I tried to look it up, I got to nowhere. Is this where "Oh, Nelly" is from?
Oh,
Because we get, like, 35 "Oh, Nellies" in this book.
let's just go
No
with
idea.
that.
Do you like that?
Sure.
I also have for something so famous for being set on the moors, we actually don't get a lot of narration or description of the moors.
Yeah, no, I was expecting, and even a friend said to me, like, "Man, if you can get through all the Moore stuff." So I was expecting the Moore's
There's not
equivalent of like
much.
the whaling scenes in Moby Dick.
No,
And there's
no,
not a lot
there's not a
of
lot.
that. Yeah.
I have we said this before. How does in the world this rank so highly in greatest love stories polls list? Could it be that people are getting confused and conflating with like lumping it with Jane Eyre?
And
I
maybe
don't get it.
I also think that this happens more often than people want to admit, where like I didn't get this book, but I'm going to assume it's like a problem with me and not the book, and so I should
Uh
just say that this is a great book. I should say
has
that
cultural
it's
momentum of a kind.
mhm,
Yeah,
like cultural imposter syndrome.
yeah, interesting. Notable quotes. There's a bunch, and also not that many. Like I guess we didn't really talk about the stylistically. There's not a lot of wow. This would make a good Goodreads quote. Um, in the narration, but in the dialogue, there's some really heavy
Yeah.
stuff. So
I
where do you
mean,
want to go
also
here?
just like the ultimate quotes about codependency.
Oh my god. Yes.
He's more myself than I am. Whatever our souls are made of, his and mine are the same. Like that is the top quote on Goodreads,
Yeah.
I believe. It's probably all over all sorts of things on Etsy. People probably say this in their wedding vows. Folks, this is not what Wuthering Heights is
This
about.
is or it is, but it's like there's but it is, but this is bad.
It's bad.
If you think this way, disaster awaits.
All consuming love is bad. Like you
Yeah.
gotta have a hobby, you gotta have some friends. At one point, Catherine is saying, "I wish I were a girl again, half savage and hardy and free." That I think gets
Interesting.
to another like sort of one of the spinning molten cores of the book is this desire for free expression
Yes.
and to push against boundaries. Bronte certainly is pushing against convention here. And then it was not the thorn bending to the honeysuckles, but the honeysuckles embracing the thorn, which
Mm.
is about Catherine and Heathcliff's relationship, but really rang the bell for me of the most popular quote from Twilight. And so the lion fell in love with the lamb, which,
Yeah.
Stephanie Meyer talked about having been influenced by Wuthering Heights as well.
It's so interesting to close read for just a second. The idea of a honeysuckle embracing the thorn,
Mm,
there is no world in which the honeysuckle is not pierced, right? I mean, just to
right.
put it sort of directly, like there is no world in which that embrace can be good. There is this fantasy of the lion laid down with the lamb, the peaceable kingdom, but that is a fantasy, right? Like this is a much more evocative and sort of corporeal of embrace and the thorn and the honeysuckle. How tender and subject the honeysuckle is. What happens to the honeysuckle to
Yeah,
embrace the
and it
thorn at that moment?
really lets Catherine off the hook. Like, she's not as bad, she's not as violent as Heathcliff, but she is not this delicate
No, she's
honeysuckle
not. She
creature.
isn't.
She's also a thorn. They both do
Yes.
a lot of damage, and they leave a lot of people in their wake. And what the origins of that are in the story, like, is it Nellie letting Catherine off the hook and her telling
Mhm.
of it? Like, who starts that? Like, where did Catherine get the good PR team? Is a great question here.
Um, there's like again, there's some like Melville Shakespeare-like moments and soliloquies. I'm going to do an extended one here. It doesn't have a reducible meaning, like this means X or suggests Y, but this is Catherine Earnshaw, Catherine the Elder. I cannot express it, but surely you and everybody have a notion that there is or should be an existence of yours beyond you. What were the use of my creation if I were entirely contained here? My great miseries in this world have been Heathcliff's miseries, and I watched and felt each from the beginning. My great thought in living is himself. If all else perished and he remained, I should still continue to be. If all else remained and he were annihilated, the universe would turn to a mighty stranger. I should seem not a part of it. Like, that is Shakespearean, man. There's questions of being and desire and selfhood and the divine all kind of wrapped up here. And I think I get just enough of these moments, and there's not just one. There's, I don't know, 6 to 12 kinda like this that are make the oyster shucking worth it.
Mm.
And some of this is painful oyster shucking for me, but the pearls, are something there. Here's another one from Catherine. My love for Heathcliff resembles the eternal rocks beneath, a source of little visible delight, but necessary. Nellie, I am Heathcliff. He is always, always in my mind, not as a pleasure any more than I'm always a pleasure to myself, but as my own being. So like it's beyond romantic love. It's like he's like rocks, like a pillar, like beyond even questioning the necessity of. It's weird, Rebecca. I
It is
find
weird.
these pretty strange. Um, and then she says, like, she realizes she's made a horrible deal and says, after marrying Edgar, well, if I cannot keep Heathcliff for my friend, if Edgar will be mean and jealous, I'll try to break their hearts by breaking my own. And so her last resort is to use her own body and being uh to sort of buy transference, hurt them. And she does
Yeah,
and
she
does.
does. It's a real, like, if Catherine can't be happy, can't nobody be happy? If Heathcliff can't be happy, can't nobody be happy? They're just willing to take down everything in their path in service of the fact that they can't have what they want.
Yeah, one more. This is Heathcliff after she's dead. Where is she? Not there, not in heaven, not perished. Where? Oh, you said you cared nothing for my sufferings. I pray one prayer. I repeat it till my tongue stiffens. Catherine Earnshaw, may you not rest as long as I am living. You said I killed you. Haunt me then. The murdered do haunt their murderers, I believe. I know that ghosts have wandered on earth. Be with me always. Take any form. Drive me mad. Only do not leave me in the abyss.
Yeah, and
Mm.
speaking about Catherine's death, like, you mentioned that after she dies, he has her dug up so that
Yes.
he can, like, see her and hold her for a second and be sure that she's there, and then he insists that when he dies, the plan will be for them to be buried side by side with the sides, like, the interior sides of their coffins taken off so that they will could be next to each other as their
Yeah.
bodies deteriorate. Like, that's
So
real
wild.
gothic shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also the kind of thing that a certain flavor of, like, hot topic teenage girl might be drawn to, that as you grow up, you learn is pretty toxic. Like, that these kinds of people are intoxicating, but also quite toxic. And that's all language, of course, that Bronte wouldn't have used, and I'm not even sure she recognizes that in its fullness, but if there's a contemporary reading, it's like, oh boy, toxic relationship."
Yeah, it's so fascinating because that I think that idea still exists too in a lot of ways for people of all kinds of like this idea of love being or desire or connection or soulmates or whatever you want to use of being almost a cosmic force that is not even really specifically about that person but through them or within them. The problem is that we're just damn people and we make mistakes and we're messy and perfect and flawed. But with through this phoenix force, I mean that's an X-Men quote for all you heads out there, has to flow through this imperfect vessel. And if you think in those terms, what else but disaster can arise? I don't know that anything else could happen. You had a wonderful idea here. You collected an incomplete list of descriptions of Heathcliff. Would you like to run through them for
Sure.
us all, Rebecca?
He's described as having habitual moroseness, being a fierce, pitiless, wolfish man, a brute beast, an incarnate goblin, monster, fiend, hellish villain, viper, having basilisk eyes, a most diabolical man, and a scoundrel more than once. And I'm sure I missed some, but
Oh, you
like
did, but those are wonderful. Yeah.
at a certain point in the book, I was like, oh, I got to start keeping track of these.
You know it's bad when the best thing someone can say about you is a scoundrel.
I really
That's
loved Incarnate Goblin.
yes. Let's see. I think that's enough quotes for us for now. Is it for you? Well, if you can't tell by now, Rebecca, what do you think a listener might use to do a differential on
I
their
mean,
desire to read this book?
I think if you can and want to do the mental time warp of imagining what it was like to read this when it came out in 1847, that's an interesting exercise. If you like plot, because this book is basically all plot, and if messy, ambiguous stories work for you, this is a good one to pick up.
I also have if you want to be smug about how people get Wuthering Heights and Heathcliff wrong, you can do that too.
Yeah, it's a good note. Not so much for you if you are looking for a traditional romance with a happily ever after. If TikTok told you this was a love story. And also, there is real rough physical and psychological abuse. And as you notice, like it's just tough
Yeah.
sledding trying to keep things straight. So
Yeah.
if you don't want to be juggling a bunch of people with the same name and constantly flipping back to a family tree, like reader, take caution.
I kind of go back and forth about because or despite the difficulty of some of just the logistics and names and what's happening. And there's a lot of like Lockwood just describing where Nellie is or how she came back. And like, is it, is that important to the feeling and mood of the book?
Mm,
Or is there a version of it's even more powerful if that's streamlined? It's an unanswerable question, but I do
yeah.
find myself wondering that. The immortal questions that Art asks here are the few that we tend to work through here. What is the good life? What do I owe my neighbor? How do I know what I know? Is this all there is? How to deal with the certainty of death? What else might there be? And what's the deal with good and evil? Rebecca, kind of unsurprisingly, seems resistant to this
Yeah.
mode of analysis.
There
I don't
is
know. I don't know.
some,
What
I
do I owe
think
my
there's,
What is the good life? What do I owe my neighbor? I
yeah, I think if
guess.
I had to write like an English 101 paper based on one of these for Wuthering Heights, I would probably peg it to what is the good life. And
Mhm.
you could make the case around having the relationships that you want or don't want, being
Yeah.
treated well by family, the consequences of getting or not getting those things. What do I like? None of the characters here are concerned with morality. Bronte doesn't seem particularly concerned with morality, so I don't think it's about what do I owe
They
my
don't sort of don't have
neighbor.
access to us at this
Yeah.
dark thing between amongst them is not really a moral question as much
And
as one of survival.
right. And the elements of some of these other questions are in play, like that people die, that Catherine
Yes.
has died is a thing that Heathcliff is wrestling with, but they're not really making sense of the world through the lens of those questions. I think it's what is the good life and really like what happens if you don't get the good life that is the primary thing going on here.
Hmm.
But it I don't know, Wuthering Heights really resists going into any of these cleanly.
I might think about what else might there be. Not only are there ghosts, but this idea of love as like a supernatural force itself,
Mm,
almost like a Greek godlike sort of divinity that is chaotic. It's not good or bad necessarily, but it's its own thing. Um, that it has overwhelmed Heathcliff and Catherine's sensibility. And if we think of that as Wuthering Heights as like insisting on the human in the
mm.
face of the enlightenment and rationality, there's something else going on here. As he even says, don't you think must be some existence beyond just you? Is that love? Is that the divine? Is that oblivion? What else that there might be? And sometimes the answer is bad. Sometimes the answer there are these demonic forces or these things that are beyond the capability of humans to control them. I keep thinking of Cormac McCarthy in Stella Maris, his last published book, where one of the characters sort of like is afraid that if you got a glimpse behind everything, that it would not be nothing, nor would it be the pearly gates, but some third thing.
Mm.
And I do think that Bronte is wondering about that. Beyond all this stuff, if we really had access to the essence of all things, are we sure we wanna tap into that? Are we sure
I
about
think
that?
that's a great point, especially knowing that she was sickly for a lot of her
Yes.
life. Like
Yes.
she goes to school and then she has to come back because she gets sick. Like, and it's unclear I think to anybody, is this like anxiety that we didn't have a
Mhm.
label for at the time, that she wants to be a homebody and she has trouble being away from things that are familiar, or physical sickness? When does the physical sickness become part of it? Like she
Yeah.
dies of tuberculosis, but there's other stuff going on there, and she's watched her family die.
Everyone's subject to dying at any time. I mean, I think that's hard to underestimate both in her life and this book. Like, it's really and even at one point, Nellie Dean says, I find I am no happier than when someone is dying as long as there's not a shrieking mourner
Right.
there, because it's peaceful and I know what's going on." I was like, "Well, that is a weird
That's
idea.
yeah,
That's a
it's a
weird idea,
dark
Nellie.
place to be.
That's a very strange place to be." But it's I think like we said, it's no surprise that this is a tougher nut to crack with the, implements we usually use here, and that's kinda cool in its
Mhm.
own way. Are we sure this is about art and writing, Rebecca?
I mean, it's obviously about the solace and liberation of reading and
Yeah,
education that was important for Bronte, and it's important for the characters, but she does not seem concerned with a
no.
writerly identity to me, or with being an artist, with the function of art. The book is not about writing in some way, but books as gateways to freedom, and certainly like that wild, free, intellectual unruliness that was part of the
Mhm.
Romantic era is right there.
Could you get the most of the gist of this from watching the Signal adaptation?
I mean, there are several adaptations. You talked about the 1939 one, which is thought to be well done, but nothing has ever become like the Signal
Yeah.
adaptation. We're going to see if Emerald Fennell can take that trophy. It'll be wild if she does. But you noted earlier that even in that 1939 version, it ends when Catherine dies, which is the
Yeah.
halfway mark of the book. So that's a no. Then, like, you can't get
Right.
the gist.
No.
Most of this is about the revenge, actually.
Yes. Half of it, at least.
Yeah.
And the weirder, stranger, less ruly half at that. If we were to make our own adaptation, would you choose a movie, musical, TV series, or Muppets?
I had fun with this. I want a jukebox musical with, like, early 2000s angsty pop punk. I'm
Uh,
nominating My Chemical Romance.
I started thinking about this as a musical, and, like, Phantom of the Opera is sort of doing some things about this, of,
You're
like,
right.
this toxic but compelling, generative, but also gross relationship. I think a musical do I want songs in this? I don't think I do. I would be curious about a play. Maybe because
Mm.
I've really got my hooks into there's some Shakespeare pieces to this, and because the most important moments are spoken, right? Whereas in a lot of books we say that are harder to translate, the most important moments are interiority or feeling. All the important feelings are said or unknown, which lends itself to a play. I don't think I would enjoy it, myself.
I'm not buying a ticket, but
Yeah.
let's go to town.
I do think a movie can do the setting and the windswept moors and the isolation and some of the real physical pieces that I think are important, and maybe if we were English in 1850, we have a better sense of the terrain here, but mine is all mediated by the idea of Wuthering Heights. Like, my idea of the moor is mediated already through Wuthering Heights, which doesn't have much, so it's just a bunch of, like, weirdly self-referential representations that's sort of based on nothing. Like, I d if you gave me 7 landscapes with grass and rolling hills in them, could I pick out the moor? I'm not sure at this point. Miscellaneous trivia, adaptations, rumors, Mr. Trade with quotes, etc.
When she was a teacher, Bronte told her students that she liked her dog more than she liked people. And it is said that when she died, her dog followed her coffin to the grave and howled outside her bedroom door for weeks. And this reminded me of those t-shirts that say, I like my dog and maybe three people.
Can I dwell on that? Maybe this is better for hot takes or the office hours. That is not a good thing. That's not a good look for people that wear that T-shirt or say that.
I agree.
Does everyone know this? Do we all know that you're like that's a you problem. That's not a the world is a problem. That is a you are a problem. The world is certainly a problem, but that you like your dog and maybe 3 people is a t-shirt you're wearing, I'm not sure you're where you
The
think you
t-shirt is
are with
certainly
that.
not helping you
No.
at that place.
No.
But I had some affection for her poor dog here. Dogs have a rough time in Wuthering Heights. I felt bad for
I
them.
I don't
Uh,
think it was all great for dogs on the moors and then farms and, they're not getting the farmer's dog subscription food service, you know what I'm saying? It's
Yeah.
not happening.
And I think this is your note here, but this is like Bronte is one of those cases where we just don't have much biographical info about
Yep.
the author, and that dearth makes the text like much more interesting and intriguing, mysterious, elusive. That we don't know much about her is part of what works here, I think.
I have one more that I forgot to put in. Emily, and I think it was Anne, co-authored a volume of poetry, had it sort of essentially the version of self-publishing. It wasn't quite the same it was today. You like pay a publisher to do it, not uncommon. There was one review of that work. Would you like to guess how many, as far as we know, how many copies of that were sold?
Oh, I have no idea.
2. 2 confirmed copies sold and got 1 review. So, there we go. Tough out there for writers always and forever. Hot takes,
All
Rebecca. We
right.
got several here. Should we get
We
through
do.
these?
This lends itself to hot takes. I
Yeah.
think girls who are obsessed with Wuthering Heights don't actually want Heathcliff. They want to be
Mm,
Kathy. She's spirited and passionate and independent. She's desired by 2 men, and she's described as saucy multiple times, and she gets to be a monster. Like,
yeah.
if anything is aspirational, it's not the love story, it's Kathy's wildness and this guy coming after her. But as we have said, this is also not the kind of love that you want to be a subject of.
No, not at all. I'd like to introduce those people who have maybe not read Much Ado About Nothing, are looking for a role model. Beatrice and Much Ado About Nothing. Maybe I just like Shakespeare better, or it's just like she gets to be feisty and fun, and she holds her own, and still doesn't like
Oh,
go nuts
and
and
great
burn
news for
everything down.
people, that is the Shakespeare of this season of Zero to Well Read, so
There
stay
might be a reason
tuned.
for that. Let's see. What else do I have? This is a critique of romance.
Mm,
Um, this is Heathcliff. She abandoned them under a delusion, she answered, picturing me in a hero of romance, expecting unlimited indulgences from my chivalrous devotion. I can hardly regard her in the light of a rational creature, so obstinately she has persisted in forming a fabulous notion of my character and acting on the false impressions she
mm,
cherished. I don't know you can take down the idea of capital R romance more directly than that,
yeah.
or a certain version, a certain idealized, extreme version of it.
I also and maybe this is I don't know if this is a hot take, I just think the title does a lot of work
I agree
for
with you.
making the book seem highfalutin. If it's called something other than
Catherine
Wuthering
and Heathcliff?
Heights,
If it's called
yeah,
Catherine and Heathcliff,
it's
I
it
don't know.
it doesn't have as much aura
It
around it.
reminds me of that scene in The West Wing where they have to, say something about Bingo Bob being the vice president. They choose Redoubtable because no one knows what it means. I
Yes.
think Wuthering is like really a shibboleth, or again another West Wing for like, or not a shibboleth. It's just sort of
It just
a
sounds
an empty
high-minded.
cipher for meaning.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, I
Yes.
agree with you.
Yeah, Bob this week was like, "What actually is wuthering?" And I was like, "I don't think that many people in the year of our Lord 2026 know
It's just an
what
archaic
wuthering
version of
is."
weathering, right?
Yeah,
That's what I saw. It's just
just
like means subject to weather.
right. And it's the name of the house. It's not like
Yeah.
the place that they, the in the natural setting that they're in, but it
No.
kind of refers to that. But if this is just called Catherine and Heathcliff, or like, I don't even know what the like a good alternate title would be. But if it's called what Lockwood Grange or whatever
Yeah.
the home is that he lives in, it's not nearly as compelling today. But the title sounds like you have engaged with something high minded.
I forgot to put this one down too. You always know it's a bad guy if they only have one name. His name is just Heathcliff. He's not like Jim Heathcliff. His name is just Heathcliff.
Yeah, you gotta watch out for guys with one name and guys with 2 first names.
Yeah, right. And Heathcliff is sort of two, it's Heath and Cliff. It's 2 names jammed into one. That's terrible. Worst of all worlds. I have nothing here for read alikes. I
Further
really don't. I
reading.
mean, like there's Jane Eyre and some gothic stuff, but like even that, I don't really have a good comp. You have
Yeah,
some
I mean,
stuff here I don't
I
think are
think
bad, but
yeah,
I'm
none of
not
it, I don't think any
in
of it's
love with
great, I
some.
agree. There's not
Yeah.
like a straight comp for Wuthering Heights. Maybe you go to Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier for more of that gothic, a more romancy story. Gatsby for a different spin on how being
Yeah.
obsessed with the past is a bad plan for you. And then honestly, like, I just thought about the movie Cruel Intentions a
That's a good
lot.
idea.
You're
It's
like,
a good
you
idea.
want your fix of messy people, you could get it in 2 hours. They're also, I think, they're step siblings in that, like, just go watch Cruel Intentions.
Which is itself a modernization of
Of Les
dangerously
Liaisons
liaison
Dangereuses,
danger. So
yeah.
maybe if you really want to be falutin, can you be low falutin?
A great
You can be
question.
you can be high falutin. Could you be like normally
Can you
falutin?
just be falutin?
Just falutin. It's like being whelmed.
Yeah.
Um, but if you want to be high falutin, go read Dangerous Liaisons, the original French. There, cocktail party crib sheet. I agree with the same thing. This is again, it goes back to like this is actually a critique of
Yeah.
an all-encompassing romantic love.
This
That's
is a
what this
book
book
about
is.
why you should not want a boy to be obsessed with you.
I think even critique is wrong. It's not even that. It's more elemental than critique. It's
Yeah,
like this is
it's
what can taken to its logical end. This is what a singular romantic pursuit does. It becomes a glacier moving through rolling down the mountain and destroying everything in its path.
yeah.
Man, an interesting one. 0 to well-read score. Each one gets a score from 1 to 10, with 10 being the highest. 1, historical importance. 2, readability. 3, current relevance of central questions. 4, book nerd read cred. And 5, oh damn factor.
Hmm.
All of these are qualified because historical importance, it's become historically important, but it's not like this is the highest example of X or nor it led to Y. It was a part of this movement. On the other hand, that could also, I could hear the argument that it heightens its historical importance because it is a one of one.
I think that means we just drop it right in the middle. You make it a 5.
5. Okay. I think readability is similar. I think the readability is pretty low, actually.
Readability, and especially the servants' accents, like,
Oh, you had that. We don't think we lingered on that. You had that.
tough.
I could barely understand it. And I skipped a lot of it because, like, I
Yeah.
can't make head nor tail out
Yeah,
of
no,
it.
and we talked about it a little in Little Women that the
Yes.
servant's accent was rough, but this is way rougher. And my edition had some footnotes for like some of the
Mm.
slang that the servants were using, but there were, in my opinion, there were not nearly enough footnotes to help me understand what was going on. Like, can we get some rewrites, please? Readability is, I don't know, 4,
Ooh,
3
low.
or
I'd say
4.
3 even. Yeah. Yeah. Whenever Joseph was getting ready to say a long thing, I was like, oh no.
I
If there
know,
were
yeah.
major plot points buried in there, I'm sorry to listeners. I'm sorry to Bronte. I'm sorry to the literary
Well,
canon, but
that
I
was,
did not get them.
I think we can take some validation that that was a critique that even Charlotte
Yes.
Brontë had of Emily
Yes.
Bronte's writing was she's never met these people. This is just what she imagines people of this class to sound like.
I think that was one of our hot takes from Little Women. Are we sure
Yeah.
that Alcott wouldn't like another crack at dialect?
Yeah.
And that's I think that's a fair
Tough.
one here. Current relevance of central questions presupposes we know what those central questions are.
I mean, toxic relationships are perpetually relevant, but also this book is so misunderstood.
Yeah.
I think this is
It's
like,
not dated. I don't think it can be dated in that regard, like, but it's hard to know what it's about. Maybe a 7? I find myself compelled by what if, is this really what people are desiring? Is this really what we understand? Or
mm,
what happens to be obsessed? If it's about obsession, it's about single-mindedness, but also about rebuke and scorn, like, that hasn't gone away. But
that's
I'm not
true.
sure I know that's what it's about.
I think I can get on board with a 6 here.
Okay, sure. This, however, I think is pretty good given everything we've said. If someone's like, I wanted to go see what Wuthering Heights is about, if they said that to me, I'd be like, that's good work.
And then they finished it. Yeah, that is good work. The
Yes.
book nerd read
So like
cred,
an
8,
8,
8 or 9, 8.
9, yeah. Oh damn factor. At its very heights, I have 9s.
Mm.
Like at these really high soliloquies slash monologues slash whatever, they're 9s. They're way up there with anything you're going to see in Melville and other things. But you have to get there. Like the rest of the stuff is so clunky, it almost makes me wonder, am I
When
reading what I'm reading when I'm reading those other
my
things?
experience of it was, I think when those heights happened, I was so relieved that something enjoyable was happening that it tempered the "oh, damn" factor for me, so I would have been like a 6 or a 7 on that.
Yeah. I'll drag us to maybe towards a 7.5 or an 8
Okay.
if you don't mind there. Okay, Rebecca, that brings us to the end of our discussion. If you've got thoughts, email us, zero-to-well-read@bookriot.com. You can follow us on socials at Zero-to-Well-Read Podcast. That's Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Go to patreon.com/zero-to-well-read for detailed show notes, free newsletter, to sign up for membership options. One of those options has the option to sign up for bonus content we call office hours that we're going to record right now, but will be available only to subscribers that level. Thanks to Thrift Books for sponsoring this season of Zero to Well Read. Zero to Well Read is a proud member of the Airwave Podcast Network. Rebecca, we did it.
We did
We
it.
scaled the heights. We weathered the heights.
We weathered the wuthered. I don't know.
Weathered the weather of Emily Bronte's singular, titanic.
God, thank God it's singular.
Inscrutable. Right. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you all later.